to show
but
ID
you agree,
to be able to
not
vote.
a citizen,
it is 0.
you can't vote.
I
Yeah, we
would
agree with that, but
absolutely
let
agree
me
with that,
help
but that's
out.
not what the problem is.
Got
The
you.
problem is that we have 0.001% of people that are illegally voting.
It's already illegal to vote if you're not a citizen.
Why not just say if you cheat and steal and you're illegally voting, you go to jail? Oh my goodness, what a concept.
That's already the law.
I don't buy that narrative.
Well, you don't buy because you never
showing
lived
ID.
it. Yeah, it's not about showing
It's not
ID.
about showing ID. It's what the ID counts.
That's
Do you
correct.
have a passport?
So
if you have a
to be
passport,
clear,
like say,
to be clear,
I have a passport.
In this clip, we're going to see Tezlyn Figaro and that politics girl shut down Kevin O'Leary as well as another MAGA bootlicker on how the SAVE Act is going to disenfranchise certain groups of American citizens when it comes to voting in the midterms and future elections. As usual, let's watch the clip in full. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts and my perspective at the end.
Good evening. I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Let's get right to what America's talking about. A Trump cabinet official, once again under fire, and it is a familiar name, Homeland Security Secretary Christy Noem. She's already in hot water over her handling of ICE operations in Minnesota, and she made this comment when talking about securing elections.
I would say that many people believe that it may be one of the most important things that we need to make sure we trust is reliable, and that when it gets to election day that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country through the days that we have, knowing that people can trust it.
The backlash was swift. Chuck Schumer called it Trump's idea of democracy, leaders selecting their voters. Noem called the criticism manufactured outrage, highlighting the need to make it easier for eligible American citizens to vote and clarifying the choice of who to vote for is obviously up to the voters themselves. Obviously, except if you actually listen to what she said. Lydia, it's one of those answers that I think many Republicans would describe as a word salad answer, but also it seems to feed into a feeling that a lot of people have that Christy Noem and DHS in particular see it as their mission to get into the voting space and to do what Trump wants them to do, which is to, at the very least, monitor American elections that he thinks are rigged.
Well, look, I think it was a clumsy turn of phrase, and I think if we've learned anything this year, it's that Christy Noem should be much more careful about the language that she uses, because this has gotten her in trouble a few times already. But big picture, I watched her comments. She was talking about the SAVE Act in Arizona, and it's very clear that she just wants people to have voter ID. I don't think there's any dictator that's all for free and fair elections. And look, this is something that the vast majority of Americans want. They want proof of citizenship. This is something that the vast majority of countries also have, whether it's India or Brazil. Some developing nations are able to figure this out. I think we should be able to figure this out as well. And I also want to address, because we've discussed on this show, whether or not proof of citizenship is too onerous. And the bottom line is that Democrats don't want voter ID at all. If it's passports, driver's license, Schumer has said he would not enact the SAVE Act, not vote for it, or any similar measure. When Georgia tried to enact any form of voter ID, just some rough guardrails to make sure that elections were safe in 2021, Biden's DOJ sued them. So this seems to be a big issue that Democrats are opposing. And I would concede that Christy Noem's turn of phrase was clumsy there.
Georgia already has voter ID.
Right, but in
President
2021,
Obama,
Biden's DOJ did
Stacey
try to stop
Abrams,
them.
Jim Clyburn have all come out and said they would be fine with voter ID. I think the biggest question is not voter ID, but what counts as an ID. That's been one of the biggest issues that's surrounding this.
Yeah, Lydia's right that Americans, including Democrats, I think, overwhelmingly are in favor of at least voter ID at the ballot place. Higher percentage of Republicans, but 80+% of all Americans are at least in favor of you have to show some sort of ID when you vote. However, let's also be clear about what Christy Noem is doing here, what Donald Trump is doing here. They're trying to take that basic, pretty uncontroversial foundation and use it as a pretext to go nuts on the election system. Case in point, the search warrant, the raid on the Fulton County Elections Office 2 or 3 weeks ago. That affidavit came out last week, and I want to be clear. Okay, so they went in, they sent federal agents into Fulton County. They seized hundreds of thousands of ballots from 2020. Let me just read you part of the justification that DOJ put in front of a judge to do that, okay? They said they got information from an unknown data analyst who downloaded data online from something called ZebraDuck, and believed it was from an open records request from Fulton County, but was not positive as he was not part of acquiring the data and received the data secondhand. That is garbage. That gets you nowhere. I don't know how and why a judge even signed this, but they're trying to take this basic fact and use it to take extreme measures.
Yeah, I think the thing is that the SAVE Act is a voter suppression act wrapped up as a voter protection act. That is not what we're doing here. We are trying to make it incredibly difficult for certain people to vote. And at the very end of the day, we're going to have a nationalized election where the federal government is taking over what is a state's job. We have talked endlessly about states' rights for years and years. It is the Republican position that the federal government has no business in the states' rights. And that's why we got rid of the John Lewis Voter Rights Act when it was passed by the 117th Congress. It's why we got rid of the other act, For the People's Act, when it was passed by the 117th Congress. Those were things that would actually have addressed voter problems. Those were things like getting rid of gerrymandering, making voting day a holiday. Those kind of things were really important. What we're doing here is not that. We're talking about having ICE surround voting places. We're talking about taking people and making them afraid. And that's
Nobody except for Steve Bannon has said.
He's a provocateur.
Well, you
he's
can call him
also
a provocateur. He could also call him somebody who has had the president's ear for a long time.
Thank you.
Nobody except for Steve Bannon has talked about ICE surrounding voting.
We're talking about
places.
ICE taking over voting rolls.
This narrative has to be bipartisan by every metric. Every 24 months, we go through this debate over and over again. When every country in the Nordic countries in Europe, France, Switzerland, Canada, Australia, solved this problem decades ago. A, you got to be a citizen to vote. You got to prove it. We all agree at the table on that one. Number two, there's such advancement in technology to make sure there's no cheating. We should implement it here and get all this crapola over with. It's getting almost boring every 24 months. Oh, the election's rigged. Oh, this guy's doing this guy's doing that. No other country has this narrative.
Kevin,
Nobody.
I agree with you. It is getting
It's
incredibly
ridiculous.
boring. We talk about this all the time. It's incredibly boring, but it's also not an actual problem. Like when you look at the statistics, illegals voting is not an actual problem in this country. You do need to show ID
you agree,
to
if
be
you're
able
not
to
a
vote.
citizen,
it is
you
0.
can't
Point,
vote.
I
Yeah, we
would
agree with that, but
absolutely
let
agree
me
with that,
help
but that's
out.
not what the problem is.
gotcha.
The problem is that we have 0.001% of people that are illegally voting. The Heritage Foundation said that 3 related fraud cases since 2017. The Brennan Center for Justice says there's 100 confirmed instances since the 1980s. This is not a real problem. The problem the Trump administration is trying to solve is that they are not doing well. They are not going to do well in the midterm elections, and they are coming up to it to find a reason.
Yes or no?
But that's not the question.
It's already illegal.
No
It's
one is
already
doing
illegal.
that. That's already illegal.
Is it?
It's already illegal to vote if you're not a citizen.
Why not just say if you cheat and steal and you're illegally voting, you go to jail? Oh my goodness, what a concept.
That's already the law. Go
Right,
ahead,
they
Tezlyn.
know that. I'm happy to answer your question when you said, who are these people? Like you said, this is a voter suppression act. A voter suppression act. Bottom line, nobody has a problem with people being able to show ID. It is what is that ID. And when we talk about, no, they don't. And so let's talk about what the real motive is.
Well,
when we talk about the cost.
Democrats used to oppose voter ID laws. That is true.
Well,
but that has changed.
Right. Well, I'm not a Democrat, so I'm independent. I know you guys always say I can't tell, but I am. So this is not about Democrat or Republican, but what I am here to represent is people who are poor and disenfranchised. The cost to actually get a passport or a birth certificate is $20 to $60, and that may not mean anything to you, but it means a lot to people who can't even afford to put groceries on their table. There's also issues with transportation with actually getting to get those documents. There's also issues with people having to make a decision between do I go to work or do I actually go get the documents. So the sworn affidavits that the states already say to see, that's the whole point. In inviting those people to be a part of the election process
Without
so
any
that we
ID?
can inviting those people to be a part of the election process is what Republicans are scared of. And even some Democrats, that's exactly it. Because the more that folks are the more disenfranchised people are a part of our election system and our process and our government, the more things change. And that is the real fear, to your point, on voter suppression, voter depression, on people who are already not even want to be involved in the system.
States that actually have passed voter ID laws, we see more voting after the fact. I don't buy that narrative.
Well, you don't buy because you never lived it.
Showing ID.
Yeah, it's not about showing ID.
It's not about showing ID. It's what the ID counts. counts.
That's
Do you
correct.
have a passport?
So
if you have a
to be
passport,
clear-
like say,
to be clear-
I have a passport. Okay, so you can say I filled in all the things. I have a passport. My passport was $165. If you don't have $165, it becomes a poll tax. If you don't have a passport, then you have to show your birth certificate.
right.
If your birth certificate does not match your current ID, so if my birth certificate says Lee Elliott because I was born as Lee Elliott, but my driver's license says Lee McGowan because I got married to Sean McGowan, those two things do not match. Then I have to go to another office and find my marriage certificate, prove that I am
Pay
the
the
same person,
$60
pay the
again.
$60,
So are you
run
guys
around town.
good with free passports?
No.
How
No one
about
is.
that? Free passports for people.
Sure,
that are
you know what I
citizens.
would like to see, Kevin? I would like to see people take civics in high school, and as soon as they graduate from American high school and they've passed American civics, they get a voter ID card coming out of American high school.
But
There's
are they
lots of ways to
citizens?
solve this. It is
right.
not the way Donald
What do you
Trump
want?
is
You
doing
want
it.
free
Here's an
passports? I'll give you a free
Here's an
passport.
interesting thing.
Kevin's
The Trump
offering free
administration
passports.
has been pushing for states to give them access to their voter rolls. They tried this with Minnesota, but they've also pushed for Republican-led states to do it. The problem is the Republican-led states are pushing back. Several other Republican election administrators have provided the data, the sensitive data, but refused to sign an agreement proposed by the Trump administration that require them to remove voters deemed ineligible by the Justice Department. And then another part of this CNN reporting says that the West Virginia Secretary of State, Chris Walker, told CNN last month they can have the voter rolls. They're going to pay for it like everybody else. It costs $500. They are not going to get our personal information. There's a concern, even among Republican states and secretaries of states, that the Justice Department is not equipped to determine who is eligible to vote and who's not. And B, that they want people's sensitive data, their driver's license numbers, their social security numbers. Why, I think, is a legitimate question. Why do they want this data?
The reason,
they're citizens.
the reason there's pushback is because this is not about Republican versus Democrat. This is about the states protecting their own constitutional prerogatives. And to go back to civics, as you mentioned before, Lee, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, says that the states control their election, the time, place, manner of the election. Congress can come in certain circumstances and pass laws, but what we can't have is DOJ coming in. How would DOJ even make that determination? Okay, now we have the voter rolls from pick your state, West Virginia. That person's not eligible. That person. What would they even base that on that wouldn't be known to West Virginia? So the states there are standing up for their own constitutional prerogatives.
And look, the states already have processes to check their voter rolls for people who are
thought
ineligible, and they
Republicans love
do,
giving stuff to the
and
states.
they
What
do
happened?
all the time. That's why we know about the handful of cases that have popped up over the years, according to Heritage and other groups. Next for us, Barack Obama.
So for me, what I don't understand is this, and I'm gonna need a lot of my American audience to help me along the way here, because what Tezlyn Figaro and that politics girl explained to me, like, that makes complete sense. If you are putting things in place that's going to disenfranchise American citizens and that's going to prevent them voting, like, surely that's a problem. If people now have to start paying for things, surely that then becomes a poll tax. And then going back to Scott Jennings, his BS the other day of him speaking about, oh, do you think black people are dumb? Do you think these people are dumb? It's not that we think people are dumb, but if people don't have the financial resources to enable them to be able to vote, surely then that is disenfranchising them. And if they're having to take money out of their pocket to enable them to vote, surely that's disenfranchising them, and that is then becoming a poll tax. Like, obviously I'm not there, and this is part of it where it comes into why I'm just a confused Brit, because, you know, I don't fully understand the way that the elections in America go, but I need a bit of understanding. Also, as well, Kevin O'Leary, how comes he's allowed to chime in? I swear that this guy was Canadian. Can he vote, or is he just at the table just to be at the table? Let me know down in the comment section below so I know your guys' perspective and your guys' thoughts. But honestly, I just think the way that Tezlyn Figaro and that politics girl handle Kevin O'Leary, I love it. I love the pushback. I love the bit of the cheek, the bit of the feistiness that it is that they give to him. Because the way that it is that he likes to come across, a bit like Scott Jennings, a little bit smug, a little bit of, well, this is obvious, why don't you know? That kind of energy, you know. But let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. And while you guys down there, hit the thumbs up button and hit subscribe, especially if you're interested in commentary, thoughts, opinions from someone that lives over the pond and that is looking from the outside in. Appreciate you guys. See you guys in the next one.